The best tax strategy that top property investors are using is to minimize the amount of tax they're paying. And that's usually a multitude of things as opposed to one single thing. So for example, one of the biggest challenges right now is Section 24, which means not being able to offset mortgage interest when the property is in your personal name. So people incorporating, i.e. setting up limited companies, buying property in limited companies, because then they can still offset their interest costs, which they can't if the property is in their personal name, which ultimately reduces the amount of tax they're paying. So that's one simple strategy, which many people are getting their fingers burnt on now, because if they've got property in their personal name, they're a high rate taxpayer. Often the amount of tax they're paying could be significantly more than even the amount of profit they're making from that particular property. But then there's more advanced strategies, for example, things like capital allowances. So when you're fitting out, let's say, a property, it might be semi-commercial, it could be HMO, it could be service accommodation. There's a degree of expenditure that's gone into that property which you can offset and bring that back to offset to reduce your tax bill. Then some people will use things like trust to be able to set their properties up in for the long term. You've got property owned in SIPs and SASSs, i.e. pensions, where they're much more tax efficient to own them there, especially commercial property, because you can't put a residential property in those type of setups. Then also you've got things like land remediation relief, which is where you can get 150% tax relief. So when you're cleaning up, let's say, for example, you bought an old petrol station site and you're going to build a block of apartments there, you're going to have to clean that site up, you're going to have to remove the old petrol tanks, and there'll be contamination within that land. And the cost of cleaning that up, let's say it costs £100,000 to clear that site up. Well, you can get 150% tax relief. That means you actually can claim £150,000 back, even though you only spent £100,000. So more simpler things is such as like capital gains allowance, which everybody has an allowance each year. And let's say you've got a couple, then you can combine that allowance. So the allowance is around £12,000 a year. So there's two people, that's £24,000. So if you're selling a property, you've got £24,000 allowance that you don't have to pay tax on before you start paying tax. And understanding this and using it year on year. And we've bought property from owners where we structured deals where we're buying one property over a period of time, one a year, so that they can utilize this tax allowance. Now, this is changing right now. It's been reduced because the current government has decided to pull that back. And look, if you're starting out and you're really not sure if this is for you, one of the things I would certainly do is look to purchase your first home where you can add some value. You're purchasing that, you're not going to be paying any stamp duty, or unlikely to have stamp duty as your first home. So you get a better deal there. If you are using a mortgage, you're probably going to get a much more better, more favorable rate than say an investor would. You're also going to get a higher loan to value, i.e. the percentage of money you can borrow versus the purchase price, as compared to what an investor would be able to do. And then let's say you're renovating and improving that property, you're living in it for a period of time, and then you put that property up for sale and you sell, and that whatever profit you make from that, there's no tax on that because it's considered as your home, your personal private residence. So there's no tax to be paid on that gain that's required as well. So in essence, there's a multitude of tax allowances available to us, but sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And it's using the smartest people who do understand these things to work with, to help us to make our business as tax efficient as possible. Now, this isn't about evading tax. This is about avoiding tax, so that you're doing it legally and correctly. So if you look at some of the huge corporations that have been in the news in the last few years, like your Starbucks, your Amazons, they pay literally no tax in this country. Why do they pay no tax? Because they hire the smartest tax accountants and lawyers to be able to understand how the system works, so to structure their business in an efficient way to maximize those allowances. Now, the ethics of it is a separate debate, but the point is they're not doing anything illegal. They're avoiding tax in a legal and compliant way. Hey, if you're enjoying these Saj daily videos, then what I'd like you to do is click on my face over here to subscribe to the channel, and also click on the bell in order to get the notifications when these videos are being released. Then what to do next is click on this video here, and I'll see you over here on this video next.